talk about an illegal peacekeeping mission on Canadian soil. The Ipperwash Inquiry includes 4 recommendations which suggest the OPP, other police forces, and the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services enact so-called peacekeeping policing policies during Aboriginal disputes. Both the Premier of Ontario and the former Commissioner of the OPP have referred to the OPP role in Caledonia as that of being peacekeepers. On May 2nd, 2007, the Premier actually joked on TV about having to issue blue helmets to the OPP. The obscenity of this joke is underscored when one reviews a list of countries where UN peacekeepers are currently deployed: Liberia, Ivory Coast, Haiti, the Sudan, Lebanon, East Timor, Kosovo, Chad, and the Congo. The UN says this about the role of peacekeeping in restoring the rule of law in failed states. The rule of law is the legal and political framework under which all persons and institutions, including the state itself, are accountable. Establishing respect for the rule of law is fundamental to achieving a durable peace in the aftermath of conflict. Laws need to be publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated, and be consistent with international human rights norms and standards. Peacekeeping works to strengthen police, justice, and corrections institutions, as well as the institutions that hold them accountable. Since 1999, all major peacekeeping operations and many special political missions have had provisions to work with the host country to strengthen the rule of law. Obviously then, peacekeeping missions are not deployed to undermine the rule of law in stable democracies by withholding law enforcement protection from innocent civilians to appease armed aggressors of a favored race. Strangely, not one politician or journalist has ever thought to ask some seemingly obvious questions. Number 1, who has the authority to authorize a peacekeeping mission on Canadian soil? 2, what legal authority exists for substituting a peacekeeping policy in place of the legal protections of the Charter of Rights and Ontario's Police Services Act during any land claim, let alone an imaginary one? And number 3, if Canadian citizens in Caledonia have so much in common with those in failed states such as Haiti, Darfur, Kosovo, and Liberia that they require a peacekeeping mission, why have our federal and provincial governments turned blind eyes to their plight? Now let's take a brief look at the dangerously flawed process used by the Ipperwash Inquiry to arrive at those peacekeeping recommendations. It is commonly believed that the Ipperwash Inquiry studied how to prevent violence during land claims. This would be a reasonable assumption, given it was sitting during the height of the violence in Caledonia. Unfortunately, it did not. The inquiry only examined how to prevent police violence against Native protesters. It did not allow the issue of Native violence against...
They killed a Native guy. What do you expect them to talk about? A sniper killed another Native. What do you expect? I'm just saying, they killed an unarmed Native. Thank you.
and gentlemen, that is what a real police force is. After everything you've seen tonight, is that not the most shameful, disgusting thing you have ever seen? After all these innocent human beings, you just heard about Native women being raped. You heard about little girls taking medication, heart attacks, suicide, and they just don't care. They want what they want, and that's it. Anyway, so let's finish. The inquiry, the Upper Wash inquiry, only examined how to prevent police violence against Native protesters. It did not allow the issue of Native violence against innocent Upper Wash residents to be studied, even though they were victims of a vexatious land claim, does that sound familiar, against their homes filed in 1992, which marked the beginning of a reign of terror, similar, almost identical to that in Caledonia. You never heard about that. Despite their nightmare, out of 139 witnesses at the Upper Wash inquiry, not one resident was allowed to testify. The evidence of their suffering went unentered into the record and unnoticed by the media. During the 3 years that the inquiry was in session, non-natives were granted a total of a mere 90 minutes with the commissioner, which took place at a single town hall meeting on June 21st, 2006, at the height of the violence in Caledonia, and the minutes of that meeting were sanitized. This is why, out of 100 recommendations, not one is specifically directed at the prevention of Native violence against innocent residents. To conclude, the Ontario government knows full well the Upper Wash inquiry did not allow the vital issue of Native violence against residents to be studied, yet it continued to use its skewed recommendations to justify the wholesale subversion of the protection non-natives are entitled to under the Police Services Act and the Canadian Charter of Rights. And it continues to allow criminals, anarchists, and the OPP to victimize them, all under cover of phony land claims and an illegal peacekeeping mission on Canadian soil. In my opinion, Caledonia represents an ongoing crime against democracy that must be ended, and it must be ended now. Thank you. I just have to say, at the risk of getting beaten up for going over time, in 2006, after we were arrested for trying to put up a Canadian flag, and we were about to try to do it again, so we fully expected to go back to jail. We were talking, Gary and I were talking about, and I said, you know, when this is over, if we're still alive, because he'd been threatened with death several times, I said, if we're still alive and we're out of jail, everything else is bonus. And to have you people in the room tonight, thank you. Aww. Gary McHale will discuss our proposed Caledonia Act recommendations in part four. But first, be prepared to be shocked. We haven't seen anything yet. By the smoking gun evidence of corruption within the OPP and Ontario's Ministry of the Attorney General. And I wish I had all night to tell you what a privilege it has been to stand by this man's side for 4.5 years. And to his wife, Christine, who did the same, and my wife, thank you so much. Thank you.